Okay, hello and welcome to OAG's latest webinar. We're going to share a bit of our passion for aviation data. No apologies made for that. At heart, I think we all are probably categorised as av geeks. Certainly, I know I am. So hopefully in good company today. So talking of that company, I have some speakers with me today. First, John Grant, as ever. John, you probably are, well, you're at least 10 years ahead of me in the AvGeek stakes.
Oh, that's not fair.
I'm fascinated to see what snippets, pearls of wisdom you're gonna pull out of the bag today.
So reading aviation ancient history is my speciality subject.
I was being kind. Yeah, I was being kind. Well, welcome, John.
As
ever, here we are again, and we are doing something a little bit different today. We're sort of hinting around that, but we're going to really focus on some interesting aspects of the data today. We're delighted to be joined by two people who I think firmly wear the AvGeek crown as well. First up, we've got Sanja Ples, who is the Chief Data Officer at ch-aviation. Welcome, Sanja. We're really looking forward to chatting with you this afternoon, and looking forward to hearing some interesting snippets from you about the data.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure to be invited. Thanks a lot.
And last, but by no means least, we've got Courtney Miller. Courtney is founder and MD of Visual Approach, and those of you who know the industry will undoubtedly have seen some of Courtney's amazing visuals out there in the internet, LinkedIn and other forums. Courtney's got a long history in the industry, and I'm sure is happy to share his inner aviation geek with us this afternoon as well. So welcome, Courtney.
Thank you. I was told this was an aviation geek support group, so I think I'm in good company.
You're in the right place. Brilliant. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Deirdre Fulton, partner at Midas Aviation. John and I have been hosting these webinars for some time now, and yeah, we'll share with you some interesting insights as we go. So, having given the game away by telling you that we're going to take a look at all things in the geek space, we're going to sort of start with our usual look at how capacity is looking, and we'll get that part out of the way quite quickly, and then we're going to take a look at some of the sort of standard metrics that OAG put out, some of the world's longest routes. What are the numbers behind them? What's driving some of those things? Where are people traveling to and from? What aircraft are operating, etc., etc. So we hope you enjoy what we've put together, and please do feel free to ask us questions as we go. And I think the aim, perhaps, for the session should be to pose a question to the team that we can't answer. So that sets the bar quite high, maybe. Well, let's hope it does. We're also going to put a poll out to you, because this wouldn't be, as Courtney described, an AvGeek support group without a quiz. So we're going to put some questions to you, and they'll appear as a poll in the chat as we go. Please answer them. They're multiple choice, so we're making it slightly easy for you. And then we'll share the answers at the end, and you can either congratulate yourself or go away and do a bit more study on the industry. Okay, let's get started then. So in terms of growth trends, this picture is looking pretty consistent now. So we've got global capacity, steady ticking over at 3.7% on 2019, although John will, I'm sure, remind us soon that there were 4 years of missed growth there. And domestic, although it looks like it's spiking up a bit in the summer, that will flatten out a bit through the peak. And we're expecting that this summer we'll see a growth of about 3% on last year domestically, and international about 2% on 2019, but a much stronger position than last summer. Anything to add to that, John?
Well, I think, we always look at capacity. The other side of this equation was two other sides. It's almost like an eternal triangle, isn't it? Frequency, number of flights being operated is not growing as quickly as capacity. And we're seeing larger aircraft types being operated in all regions of the world. The regional jet market in the US that was around for 15, 20 years is nowhere near as big as it used to be. So we're, for all of those people worried about sustainability and everything that we talk about there, we are actually cramming more seats on fewer flights and on more efficient aircraft. So all of those things are, I think, extremely positive. So I think that's a good sign. And I also, although it's not such a good sign if you're traveling, think we need to recognise that load factors are probably now creeping back up to record levels for the next 3 or 4 months of the year as we hit the summer season. And we're at peak aircraft utilisation. Every low-cost airline in the Northern Hemisphere is setting their aircraft off at 5:30 in the morning. Most of them return home about 1:30 the next day, having done 3-4 round trips, whatever it happens to be. So it's a really, really busy time of the year. And touch wood, we've not experienced any of the usual events that happen at this time of the year. So
I hope you haven't tempted.
I know, we haven't had any really bad weather in North America and severe thunderstorms. French ATC have not yet woken up, because when they do, they'll realise they need to go on strike. So that's something that needs to be considered as well. And surprisingly, and it's a fact that there's a general election and they're not actually doing anything in the UK immigration and border control all seems to be working very efficiently at the moment. So there's a lot of strain on the system is the bottom line. I mean, wherever you are in the world, there are issues with capacity, be that just airport staff, be that air traffic controllers, be that pilots. There's a lot of pressure in the system at the moment. And if you are queuing, just as a plea, if you are traveling and queuing somewhere in the next couple of months, just remember there are people who are trying to get you to where you need to get to as quickly and as safely as possible, and that they're doing that every day. And it's a lot of pressure on the system. So give them a break sometimes.
Oh, when you're in that immigration queue tomorrow, John, you remember that.
Well, I'm putting it out there just in case someone's listening and can get me fast tracked through Orlando on the way into Florida tomorrow afternoon about 4 o'clock.
Manifest your way out of that.
Yeah.
Talking of weather events, we sort of can't not acknowledge. It does seem like we're heading into a Northern Hemisphere hot summer again, doesn't it? Courtney, I think you might be a little bit removed from the worst of the high temperatures. Have I got that right in my geography? It's the eastern seaboard, isn't it?
No, you got that way wrong. Listen,
okay, you're
Texas,
melting. You're melting.
Like we bake here. In fact, we had to replace an air conditioning unit, which was a life or death situation.
Oh man!
So we get the storms, we get the heat. Yes.
But right now the heat wave is further north of you, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah. So you guys are used to the heat, but some of your colleagues in Boston and further north are not so used to what's happening right now. And we're seeing that, aren't we, across parts of Europe and beyond. And I think it's interesting. The last couple of summers we've speculated about to what extent do higher temperatures might they start to impact on that peak. No evidence of that yet.
On the peak in travel?
Yeah. Do people go somewhere, a sunspot destination? We saw lots and lots of negative press last summer in particular about the high temperatures right across a bunch of leisure destinations. It had been the same the year before. But there doesn't seem to be, maybe there's a longer cycle of change.
It's one of those things that, subtly over time, we will see the shoulder seasons spread out, and we'll see more capacity in those periods. And what was a 12-week charter series will become a 16-week, whatever it happens to be. But it's also the geography, isn't it? Suddenly people don't go to Greece, they go to the Baltics, or they go to northern France, wherever it happens to be, where there's a couple of degrees cooler.
I mean, the aviation is probably going to follow the trend. The people will be setting the trend. But what I have noticed is that the season in the south is becoming longer. With what used to be the high peaks of the season are probably being removed. So it's kind of more spread towards the spring and the fall, and less towards the actual peak summers.
It's interesting. Someone's put a comment here about seeing a lot of Indians in Iceland 3 weeks ago. I mean, it may well have been an Air India tech on its way back to Delhi. But, I mean, everyone is just, it's amazing how busy markets are. I was in Florence recently, and it was rammed with tourists from Japan, United States, all over Asia. The world is traveling again for sure.
And whatever challenges we might be seeing from hot temperatures and not booking travel, we're seeing just as much reverse flow, right? I think somebody in the chat suggested that as well, right? Where, in the US, where we had everybody heading to the sun destinations during COVID, equally as much they're heading to the mountain destinations during the summer, which was traditionally more of a winter destination. So, having spent a week in Colorado Springs a few years ago, I wholly understand the allure, and it's kind of that reverse trend we're seeing.
Yeah, compounded, I guess, by are we seeking more outdoor nature, that kind of travel rather than
experiential travel.
Shopping in cities, that's the word I was looking for. Thank you. Anyway, right, let's move on, and we'll never get to all of these exciting data points that we've promised you. So coming back to the slide deck, we have got, this is something that OAG publish a couple of times a year, usually when the seasons change, the world's longest routes. So these are non-stop routes, and just updated in May. So they encapsulate what's operating this summer and therefore the summer season. So I think we all know the longest flight, of course, is Singapore JFK, just over a third of the way around the world. Operates with 2 full crews, and they have 3 days off in between arriving and leaving again to recover. So yeah, it's probably not top of my bucket list to take, but I know that one of our speakers is going to be taking one of these longest flights. Sanja, you're hopping off to Auckland, aren't you, later this summer?
Yeah. Yes, I have actually decided to spend my winter in the warmer, in the southern hemisphere, at least a month of it, and I will be flying from Doha to Auckland on an A350-1000, which is going to be the first for me. I've flown on the 350-900, very much looking forward to the 1000 version as well. What I'm not really looking forward is spending 17 hours entertaining with 6, so that's going to be either a proper team building or an interesting session, family session.
I think an iPad will be your friend. There are lots of downloaded content.
I'm preparing myself mentally for it and gathering ideas. Anyone who has to, please let me know.
It's interesting when you see a list like that, isn't it? And you think about the evolution of aviation, commercial aviation, and the sector lengths that are now being operated compared to 20 or 30 years ago. It's just phenomenal, the advancements that have been made in terms of technology and performance that allow these sectors to be operated year round and with good payloads. It just staggers me when you think about, if you wanted to go Europe to Australia 30 years ago, you were probably doing a 2 or a 3 stop service through the Middle East, through Southeast Asia, and eventually get into Australia. And now you can do 1 stop, Heathrow Perth, CDG Perth. It's such an advancement.
It's great, isn't it? And
actually, it is, but it's even more remarkable to see how airlines came to that, because it's I think from my own perspective, and obviously I haven't been working in an airline doing long haul flights ever, but it's very interesting to develop these routes and to actually make them work. So I think that's even more remarkable than technological development that we see.
I think interesting, though, to see, and I'll just go back to the slide deck for a moment, for those who maybe missed the last point there, that, you know, in some cases, these are aircraft operating at real extremes. So the Shenzhen, Mexico City route that China Southern have started this summer is only direct on the way to Mexico City, because altitude there means a fuel stop on the way back. So we've really, you know, we're seeing airlines really pushing the boundaries, aren't we?
Yeah, we are. You know, a lot of these are located in Australia and New Zealand, and you know, connectivity is absolutely important. And for some of these airlines, they're creating marketing advantage by having that one-stop service or the non-stop service. I mean, you know, there are plenty of ways to get between Doha and Auckland, but only one carrier does it non-stop and does it on a daily basis.
Yeah. Okay. Let's look a little bit behind then, and specifically we just pulled out Doha Auckland because we were kind of interested in the geeky way that we do, in where people were originating from on the Doha to Auckland sector. And of course, if we look at this next year, Sanja, we'll know that you're contributing to some of this. But interesting to see. So you can see the pie chart here shows the region of origin, with the bulk obviously originating in Europe. And then the color coding on the map, it's a little small, but you know, we just wanted to sort of visually show you quickly that South Africa is an important contributor. About 6,000 people a year traveling from South Africa to Doha and then on to Auckland, which feels like quite an incredible journey, doesn't it? And sort of says that, you know, obviously not a big enough individual market to make a direct service sustainable, but we're not far away from having, when we look at probably the market from Australia and New Zealand, between there and South Africa, there's got to be scope for more capacity, doesn't there?
But it also comes down to the product, and the product is, you know, a combination of the airline that's operating and what their brand is like. It's about the immediacy of connectivity, and it's about the price. And I'm sure Qatar Airways have probably got the most aggressive price in the market from South Africa to Auckland. They've certainly got one of the best products in the sky. I don't think anyone would dispute that. And the connectivity is really sharp in both directions. And when the options are limited, then that's what happens. And I mean, you know, one of those geeky facts, the UK, South Africa, or the UK Johannesburg market, 15% of it, maybe even more, still routes through the Middle East with either Emirates, Qatar Airways or Etihad. Not so much Etihad. They don't have high frequency, but it's, to Sanja's point, it's how airlines are able to move markets and shift passenger flows by having the right combination of characteristics in place, is amazing. I mean, geographically, you would think you go via Perth, and there is a direct Perth-Auckland service that operates, I think, on a daily basis. It's just that it's they've got the market, they've probably got the distribution sorted out in South Africa, and it works very well.
And you get a sense of how airlines are sort of trying to shift markets around, don't you? When you look at, we just took those top 10 longest routes, excluding the newest ones. We looked back at data last year to see what the sort of share was of people just travelling between these 2 points, the direct passengers. Interestingly high on Heathrow, London, Perth, which is probably because for so many years, there wasn't a direct option, and people had to go indirectly over Singapore or Dubai or Qatar laterally. But then actually there are some markets where the traffic behind, the connecting traffic on through those Middle East hubs is a significant proportion.
That really stands out to me, right? Of the takeaways that just jumped out at me, that is the Heathrow Perth being, over 60% direct. It was not expected, at least for me. I would have expected you're going to see some flow from Sydney, Melbourne, on Qantas through Perth, and it doesn't look like that's happening. Either that, or the revenue management team is doing its job, and there are enough people in Perth that want to go. Good for Qantas. That's great. It looks like a successful.
Yeah, I mean, anyone who wants to leave the UK and go to Australia, the visa application process points you to those secondary cities. So there's a very large UK diaspora in Perth at the moment. And obviously, it's a specialist aircraft. Its capacity is not as big as perhaps otherwise, and the aircraft, as you say, does actually run through to Melbourne. But it also runs through to Melbourne at an optimum time for the business traveller for the local market from Perth to Melbourne. So they've got the best of both worlds. They can revenue manage for the local segments as they need to, and yet they can top up with onward connectivity behind Melbourne as necessary, behind Perth as necessary, and Qantas are going to make Perth their second hub in Australia. And as we look at some of the later stuff about 321 XLRs, you can get to a lot of places from Perth on that aircraft type.
Yeah, you certainly can. And just let's skip around the order of our slides a little. And you segued nicely into the slide on that, John. So we can't not talk about, when we talk about the longest routes in the world, we sort of can't avoid the fact that there are some significant aircraft orders out there, 496 according to the data we got from Sanja, on order, and they're going to start coming into service later this year. I think we said last month, or we talked recently about they're going to IAG. They're the launch customer. They were going to go to Aer Lingus, but actually they're going to go to Iberia, and they've already announced that they're going to put them on Madrid, Boston, and then Washington, which will allow their Madrid-Washington service to be year-round rather than just seasonal. And that's the win, isn't it? That's the win for using an aircraft that's the right size for the market. I think what's really interesting, and I think lots of people will have seen this, this one, which is if you take Delhi as a centre point, and we're pointing to Indigo, who've got the biggest order book for these aircraft. All of these blue dots are within range of this aircraft. If you change the point of the centre to Madrid, just topical, why not? Again, significant opportunity. There's a question about market sizes and all the rest of it, but this really has the potential to bring signind change in that segment of the market, doesn't it?
It does. I'm interested. Courtney, what do you think American and United are going to use these for?
Well, let's go back to the chart because I know exactly what they're going to use them for. see all these blue dots on the west coast of Greenland? Yeah, perfect. Look, so this is interesting because it's actually Iberia that jumps out at me. But, American, United, Delta, look, they have had a single aisle that is doing transcon routes for 20 years. It's a 757, right? So they do have, they do have precedent in how they're going to use those long haul narrow bodies. Great transatlantic airplane, great Latin American airplane, by the way. You know, we think about the ocean, the maritime ocean between the U.S. or between North America and Europe. We don't often think about the jungle ocean between kind of Colombia, Venezuela, and the major cities of South America, right? That's definitely separating that. The 321, the XLR will do that, but I think what gets lost a little bit in the XLR, and probably where we'll see more of this benefit, we're focused so much on the range and how that extra range will be used with the aircraft. I don't think that's the real benefit of it. I think what we're seeing out of Iberia, what we're seeing out of Frontier, you know, aircraft that have ordered that airlines that have ordered that aircraft, the payload benefits for high density configuration are going to be something that they're going to extend to ranges that the 321neo already operates in less dense configurations. So I think that's where we're going to see a lot of that benefit. We're hearing some concerns about the engines at these long stages doing that only, how that's going to impact overhaul times, and that we're bullish on the aircraft. We're not as excited necessarily. We think there's going to be some balance, but really like the payload benefits that it brings.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because we speculated about this when we were talking to Sanja earlier. You know, probably in Europe, we're comfortable with the idea that we could go in a narrow body to the Middle East. I don't think I have yet, but that doesn't faze me too much. Although the idea of being on the A350 900 or the A350 1000 is an appealing one too, I have to say. But the prospect of a transatlantic crossing on an A321, I'm not there yet, and I can't quite articulate why. Maybe because in my mind, I'm associating this aircraft with low-cost carriers in the market I fly a lot in, and I can't quite visualize what the product's going to be like and how it's going to feel, and is it going to feel like I'm sitting, you know, on an LCC in a high dense configuration. Really, really, really uncomfortable for 6 hours. I don't know.
Well, let's flip that question, because I think there's a different way that customers look at it. It's not a question of would you rather ride on a wide body across the Atlantic. I would rather ride a wide body on a 30-minute flight. The question is how much extra would you be willing to pay to fly on the wide body? Right. This is a step change in unit costs. I mean, narrow body aircraft are just inherently more efficient. You don't get the revenue benefits of cargo and the premium classes and whatever. So it will be a balance. We will still absolutely see the North Atlantic dominated by wide bodies. The question is, what can TAP and JetBlue and Aer Lingus, though they also have wide bodies, but what can they do to disrupt that market and really kind of get in and fragment it?
Yeah, and it's interesting because, I mean, you know, I've been doing, and Deirdre's been doing some work in Central Asia, and the Central Asian market is rapidly growing. Fastest growing region in the world. It's one of the smallest, so, you know, it doesn't get a lot of coverage. I did a 7 hour 20 sector from Tashkent all the way back to London Heathrow, non-stop, and it was mine. No, it was pretty boring after about 4 hours, but you know, it prevented me stopping in Istanbul, and it's growing the market because more people are using it. And to your point, Courtney, it's allowing these airlines to put fares in the market that are stimulating demand, and that's what this is all about. It's you know, I think it's great that we're seeing this happen.
It's not my mind that I worry about growing numb on that 7 hour narrow body flight.
Okay.
No, me neither.
I won't ask what it is that you're worried about.
So that leads us nicely to...
One thing that I want to add to it, if you don't mind, is that, I mean, for couple of months a year, let's say 5, even 6 months a year, it can be definitely profitable to operate wide body on a certain city fair. But in the low season, it's more economical for the operators to operate 190, 200 seats, and it's more efficient for them. And so far in the aviation industry, we have seen a lot of disruption and innovation coming from the low-cost carriers. But this is really the opportunity of hybrid carriers and legacy carriers to kind of bring in this disruption and to prove that they are flexible and agile enough to actually adapt to the market economy and to make their numbers look better. I mean, the narrow bodies on transatlantic are not a new thing. It has been happening. It has been done. We just didn't have a new exciting aircraft to serve that market that has been technologically advanced for a very long time. And if you look at the oldest 757 that United is operating, is 35 years old. It has above 90,000 hours on the screen. So I would be surprised if we would not see really a lot of movement in that segment that is actually showing advanced.
And of course, we do. We've got one of Courtney's nice charts here that just illustrates exactly that point, that the 757-200 has a lengthy history on, I think you're beyond 3,000 nautical miles here, aren't you, on this chart? And that really, that tells the story, doesn't it?
Yeah. And if you look at the list here, oh, sorry, Courtney, please go ahead.
No, just quickly. I think the takeaway here is this isn't new, right? Sanja very correctly pointed that out. But then if we look at that, let's not even consider market growth, because you have to also consider that market growth could increase the size of the aircraft, and that's why we're seeing a lot of wide body health on these markets as well. But consider the room left to just grow into what we had.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a ton of room for, and I think the unsung hero in this, besides the greatest unsung hero of all time, which is the 757-200 and probably 300, because that thing was a cask beast. But the unsung hero in all this is the 321 LR and the regular Neo, because it can do this, right? And it's going to be doing a lot of it. The XLR is incremental. I'm sure Airbus would hate me saying that, but it truly is, right? In adding capability to an aircraft that is already capable, and that's going to have a huge role in this kind of regrowth. And
to what Sanja was saying, about flexibility to mix and match wide body to narrow body capacity by season, you think of all of those points in Scandinavia, the big 3-4 cities in Scandinavia, where they don't have not traditionally had year-round transatlantic capacity because the demand was not there.
Yeah.
Suddenly, they're back in the game for year-round service. Now, that's good for them, but then you begin to think, well, hang on, how does that play out for someone like KLM at Schiphol, who for many years have been sucking capacity out of Scandinavia and carrying it across the Atlantic? Actually, that might not be a bad thing for Schiphol. Maybe they reduce the amount of frequency, or KLM reduce the amount of frequency, given their noise and environmental issues they've got to deal with at this moment in time. So in that small, subtle way, we're going to begin to see things shifting about flows of traffic and aircraft types in major markets like Europe to North America. And it never ceases to amaze me that every year we probably think, North America is... We talk about North America transatlantic as being a mature market, but it has a lot of change taking place every year for a mature market.
Well, I mean, just look at the SAS, which is a great European example now, shifting away from Star Alliance. They have 2 days ago they have
started in Atlanta, yeah,
exactly, and it's Copenhagen to is it New York or New York on 320 LR. So there are so many new things happening even now without the XLRs. So it's definitely going to be interesting to look at it.
Yeah.
So another challenge that this will expose then is because I agree with the seasonality. It's quite interesting, and operate a wide body during peak months, shift that over to narrow body during the off peak months. The problem is then what do you do with those wide bodies? Because it's probably off peak everywhere, right? So is it better to discount, keep the wide bodies flying? Do you it's a great time to do maintenance, but do you have training issues, right? There's this balance of operations that becomes interesting as well. Do you just discount on other routes?
Yeah, and I mean, there used to be some wide body capacity switching from transatlantics down into the North America Caribbean market in the winter season. How's that going to play out in the future? Maybe there will be too much wide body capacity or units available for use.
Ouch. We have opened the hot topic.
Yeah, that's an interesting proposition. Maybe
don't tell Boeing that, because that's the only thing they can sell at the moment.
Segueing nicely into my next slide. You guys are making this easy for me here today. So this is what's happening with some of these wide bodies at the moment. And I guess the speculation is some of this going to change. So when we were thinking about, the longest narrow body routes and what they look like, Courtney very helpfully suggested to us, why don't we think about the opposite end of the spectrum, where we've got, and we saw, to some extent, we saw this in the pandemic when those wide bodies weren't going anywhere exciting. But actually, wide bodies have always been a feature in some markets, in some big domestic markets for some time. What we've done here is we just took a quick look at under 1,000 kilometers, and we're flicking backwards and forwards here between nautical miles and kilometers, but that's okay. We wanted to make the point here that actually these are short journeys. What we see is the region with the highest share of wide body operating on journeys like that is the Middle East. And you've got some core trunk routes like Jeddah Riyadh, like Dubai, Doha, where there is such demand that actually wide bodies are full. And I think, John, I know you and I, maybe you haven't, but I recently sat on that Dubai Doha leg on an A350-900, and it was rammed. Similarly, Japan, who is making up a significant share of the Northeast Asia percentage here, has for a long time operated wide bodies on core domestic routes. And I think we've also sat on a Tokyo Okinawa. It was an A350, I think.
It was.
Yeah. I don't think it was quite as rammed as the Dubai Doha one, but it was busy. Japan's really interesting because there's a competing mode there, and it's a really effective high-speed rail alternative. But what it doesn't offer is it doesn't offer loyalty, doesn't offer points or air miles for travel, which can be important for those people who are regularly traveling around by air domestically in Japan. We understand. So I think it's really interesting. You've got these parts of the world which have got supersized domestic markets. Hong Kong, Taipei is another one where there's a significant share operating, and there's all sorts of aircraft operating in that. And we'll see in a moment. Courtney's given us another chart that'll expand a bit more.
Some of this is about aircraft utilization as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's about, we've got an aircraft on the ground for 5 hours. We can do an hour and a half sector each way. We can fill it with connecting traffic. It's a slam dunk. Why would you not do it? I mean, it's an absolute no-brainer. And it works very, very well. You sometimes, I've always wondered in the UK market, you have British Airways who are operating relatively high frequency Edinburgh, Glasgow to London Heathrow. Why at times they've not actually scheduled wide-bodied equipment on some of those services. And I've never understood that. Ad hoc, it happens. Sometimes you see that happen. But the other side to that, and going back, excuse me, to the Amsterdam experience, is talking to Wilco and his colleagues in Schiphol in their air service development team. They were saying the challenge is if BA want to substitute a 321 for a wide body movement on a daily basis, then do they have the gate capacity? Can they actually accommodate an aircraft that suddenly needs an hour and a half turnaround rather than a 45-minute turnaround? Where are they going to park it? And if they can't guarantee dispatch reliability on time, then that aircraft gets back to Heathrow late and you've got 150 people who've missed their connection. Not great. So we're constantly posing new challenges, and we're being asked to solve new issues in every part of the aviation ecosystem, be it airports, airlines, travelers, regulators. It's forever changing.
And I think this illustrates that nicely. It's a sort of more layers on the adding in, looking at a slightly different range, and adding in some other aircraft types. There's lots of examples, aren't there, in some key markets where you've got wide body long haul aircraft operating short haul.
Yeah, and the key is long haul, right? So, we wanted to look at the long haul specialists, the 787, the 350, to see where they're not specialized. Well, there are, like, just exactly as John said, the appropriate question is, well, why?
Yeah.
Because maybe they're repositioning between hubs. I think I see Chicago DFW. Sounds like an American flight that's repositioning for international traffic. Some are tags. I think Santiago, Buenos Aires is a tag, right? So we'll see that in terms of basically leveraging the long haul to kind of get two cities from one long haul. But then you start to point, you get to the regions that Deirdre, you had highlighted in your previous chart, where we have the Middle East, we have East Asia, both China and Japan. Very different reasons why they're using those aircraft. I'm sure utilization is still a major part of that, but it's just seats, and people show up for those seats. I mean, the 747 domestic existed for a reason, and it's Japan, right?
Yeah.
The thing we're looking at now, and what we're quite excited about is, we just got done talking about long haul narrow bodies. Really interested in the short haul narrow body, particularly in China. And this is where we really kind of see opportunity for Airbus to just fill out that A330neo. I mean, if you're not a long haul specialist, at least not in the context of the 787 and A350, we think the 330neo is almost a lock for China because they can't get anything else. So the idea of the long haul narrow body is also being balanced at the same time by the short haul wide body.
Yeah,
there are some regions on this map that are really interesting for me to observe, like Africa. That's not a region you mentioned that we mention that often in this context. And you see here that there is a usage for it. The Middle East is obviously a different example. If you take the Emirates as a proper example, there is a reason why they still have that many A380s operating. They just feed in these masses of people from the region into their hub for all of the flights. And I think that on your previous slide, you didn't show there is a Bahrain to Dubai as well. Connection, which is what, 500 kilometers, something like that.
Yeah.
But so that explains kind of the Middle Eastern segment, at least from the Emirates perspective. But Japan, Tokyo, and Asia are a completely different thing, as you said. I mean,
there are so many different reasons. I mean, from my own scheduling days, I know serving Santiago, either through Sao Paulo or Buenos Aires, is just great aircraft utilization for European carriers who can't bring the aircraft back any earlier to Europe because it will not hit the waves. It will arrive at 3 o'clock in the morning. It's not going to get slotted. End of. In West Africa, again, airline, my own personal experience, there are particular places in West Africa that have such small markets that they can only be served on these triangular type routings. There are other markets in West Africa where, quite frankly, you do not want to leave your aircraft on the ground for any longer than you need to, and you'll move it somewhere else for safety and security reasons. And, you know, the biggest market in West Africa has the airport with the biggest problem. So airlines rapidly get in there and they get out as quickly as they can, even if it's to somewhere with a very small market. So they do that. And as Craig says, sometimes you just get airlines needing to do crew training, or utilize, you know, just bring an aircraft into the fleet and they need to put it on a short haul sector. So there's all sorts of reasons for this happening. What it does, though, is sometimes provide some great opportunities to fly wide body on short haul sectors. And for geeky people, you know, buying a business class seat and being able to lie flat between Santiago and Buenos Aires rather than piled high in a 737 is a nice experience.
It's a fun afternoon, fun day out, isn't it? I'm conscious of time and the fact that we have lots more geeky insights to share with you on this slide deck. We might not get through them all, but I know you'll all be on the edge of your seat waiting for the poll results, so we have to allow for time for that too. So let me come back to the slide deck and we'll try and rattle through some more of these other little interesting snippets for you. And noting, I think absolutely, Marshall, we would love to talk about high-speed rail and the buoyant air domestic market in Japan, but equally in other markets too, because China developments in high-speed rail there are moving apace, and in other parts of Asia. So yeah, it's definitely a topic on our watch list to come back to. Right, so most seats on the aircraft. So we all know the A380, well, hopefully we all know the A380, biggest passenger aircraft in service. We've got some stats here about who has them. Most people, we didn't put this as a poll question because we thought we'd be giving you an easy ride there. Emirates have most, but there still are a number of other airlines operating them. There's an interesting, so this is the seat density ranking by carrier, which is the average across the aircraft that they have in the fleet. So you can see it's ranging from as 400 up to 550, but the average is 499. And ASEAN are sitting just at that midpoint. And we've got Emirates in particular, they obviously have most. They have got a range of 7 different configurations from 484 through to a quite astounding 615. That 615 configuration has got 557 seats in economy and 58 in business. Has anyone been on a 615-seater aircraft? I don't think I have.
They have a total of 15 of them, but I wasn't on any one of them, unfortunately.
Yeah. And this week they're operating them on 10 routes across the network. And I don't know how visible the points are, but we've got them going down to Indonesia. They're going to Taiwan, Mauritius, and then a number of markets in Northern Europe. I think we've got Manchester, Birmingham. I'm struggling to see the screen myself.
Looks like there's Heathrow.
Yeah, we've got Heathrow and
Dusseldorf, which is really surprising. Dusseldorf was geeky.
Is it a Euro thing? Is that a Euro thing?
Dusseldorf was one of the Emirates' first destinations in Europe. Before capital cities, they were in Dusseldorf. The North Rhine-Westphalia beach market to Dubai is pretty big.
There you go. So there we are. That was a little interesting snippet. We're going to move on. Talking about Emirates leads us into thinking about fifth freedoms. And we took a look at fifth freedom routes by carrier, and these are just the 10 carriers with the biggest. There are about 180 fifth freedom routes in 2023 across various parts of the world. I'm guessing most people will know what they are, but fifth freedom routes are those where a carrier operates between two countries that's not their domicile country. Emirates, you can see, are operating them in all sorts of interesting places. Sorry, that was Emirates there. And Ethiopian also have a considerable number, and you can see they're also operating them in, in at the ends of their network, essentially, where it makes sense to have a connecting flow onto.
I mean, these are very much at the end of the spectrum of fifth freedoms, aren't they? Because traditionally they tend to be those short 2-3 hour aircraft utilization type flights. But Emirates have been really successful at doing, these long hauls, obscure traffic rights that they've picked up over time that they suddenly start operating. It's quite an amazing operation. Athens, New York, Barcelona, Mexico City, and down into Southeast Asia, I think are quite interesting. But there's also some really rogue ones, and Air China have just started. Was it Madrid to Havana as a fifth freedom route? I mean, seriously, who are they hoping to carry between Madrid?
Who's traveling? Who's traveling on it? You can't tell us that it exists and not tell us who's on it. Big
local market, absolutely. But I'm sure Iberia and Cubana and Air Europa are saying that's our market.
Is it a medical exchange program?
Yeah,
I don't know. It might be.
Must be something. And there's also Singapore Airlines who do, strangely enough, they do Manchester, Houston.
Well, I wonder if in 5 years we will see some of these routes switching to point-to-point routes.
Yeah.
They are the warm-up act, aren't they?
Yeah,
creating the market.
And then which ones will be? I'm amazed by how Ethiopian is doing and what they are doing in Africa and how they are consolidating the African market and then doing all of these fifth freedom rights also in Europe. And it's just, I think that they are very, they're doing a very smart thing there, expanding their footprint on both sides of the market. So bringing people in and spreading the network towards the west and east.
Yeah, some interesting things at play there, aren't there? Okay, let's. We're catching up. Now this is getting really geeky. They're getting deeper as we go into this.
We're in the weeds.
So, you were behind this one, John. We asked ourselves the question: which routes have the most stops? So, in terms of a routing, and these are the top runners.
With the same flight number, right?
Yeah, with the same flight number. Yeah.
So there are 4. Well, there are more than 4, but these are the ones that come top of the list. So Safari Link is at the top of the operation. Whether questionable whether this is a fully scheduled service or not, but we're going with it.
I think that's my team supporting the schedule on behalf of OAG there, and I know they have had it with all of these African bush hoppers.
But this one's tenuous.
Like as they wish.
We're taking it as a win.
PAL Airlines certainly isn't, and Southwest certainly is not. They're very credible.
Yeah, and we've got Rex as well in Australia. But these are interesting, aren't they? You get on, and it's a long time before you get back off again if you're going.
And they're classically called milk runs, aren't they? By around certainly in North America. But if you analyse, Southwest sell seats on this flight, not only down the West Coast, but they'll also be selling Denver and they'll also be selling Nashville. And, there'll be people who will be buying that flight and not realising they bought the 12-hour epic experience.
The old 6-stopper.
Yeah, amazing. But equally there are people out there who they live for this. This would be their
this would be a perfect day, wouldn't it? It'd be a perfect day.
Be an extreme day out, wouldn't it? Really. Okay, let's move on. So a little bit of a look at the most new routes this summer, and we sort of consolidated it up into country pairs so that we could make it more manageable, basically. because there are quite a lot of new routes operating this summer, and some of that is recovery from the pandemic still, where you've got routes that haven't perhaps operated since 2019. That might be maybe only the second time I've said that this webinar, so we're getting better.
Getting better.
I was intrigued to see this though. USA, Mexico, and of course it's the new Tulum. Hopefully I've pronounced that correctly.
Tulum.
South of Cancun. So there's a raft of new routes operating between the US and Mexico. 9 of those to this new airport. Monterrey is also popular. There's a bit of competitive action going on between France and Italy, with Ryanair adding some new routes from Beauvais. I'm speculating as to whether Beauvais still has the tent in the departures area, but it's been a long time since I was there, so maybe somebody can help me out in the questions. Maybe it doesn't. So there's some interesting stuff going on. We know that Italy is experiencing strong growth, both in terms of the US market coming into Italy, but there's some interesting growth happening into Italy from other parts of Europe as well. So that was an interesting little snapshot. I don't know if we have time for
one quick point on that. Mexico finally extracted itself from Category 2 purgatory, so they can now, the Mexican carriers can now add a lot of those routes, that and Tulum, which is of course the lion's share of that.
Sure. Okay, good. Thank you for that. We'll have to skip through this one really quickly, John, but we just wanted a line in the sand, didn't we, to talk about who's sitting where. Looking back 10 years, the share of first to business is shifting, as we know.
Yeah, fewer and fewer absolute business and first class seats around the world. Airlines getting out of the first class cabin in many markets. Very little differential between that and their business class products. But the real story is that little bit further back behind business class, where premium economy is growing rapidly in all markets and is one of the, if not the most profitable cabin for most airlines. They fill it consistently, quite a large margin for up from economy class, and maybe another 2 inches of seat pitch, and you get your meal served on China if you get a meal.
I took a very quick look into our data to compare the total number of seats in a fleet of a carrier, and then calculate the percentage of premium economy and W class for wide bodies. So the top runner on the YP is TAP Air Portugal. Out of total number of seats, they offer 34, slightly above 34% in YP. So that's obviously going for their product. And on wide bodies, it's Air Premia with 17%. So there is this high discrepancy between the W and the YP products as well in general.
Interesting. Okay, we've got 2 minutes left, and we have got 3 slides left. So can we make it? I don't know. We can't talk about geeky things happening in this amazing industry that we all love without talking about cargo, surely. John made me put in a picture of these poor lobsters. I'm a big fan of lobsters. Don't be under any illusion. I prefer them cooked rather than live. So the importance of cargo should not be underestimated. It's a significant contributor in some markets, not least somewhere like Halifax, St. John's, where lobster is the main product that's exported. It's going to China and Europe. Well, that's a very loud ringing phone. That would be you, John. But also right across, and I think our examples here are all in the Americas, actually. in terms of the products.
They are, but you could have similar
take
stories from
anywhere,
Australia to Japan of fresh fish, perishable products. You can have it into the Middle East from all around the world, perishable product. You know, it moves everywhere, and it's just amazing. You do not know what is sitting underneath you when you're on many of these aircraft.
We talked about being the security is safer than trucking. That was a North American example. But again, another ship has been abandoned in the Red Sea, right? So maritime shipping is having a huge, and the challenges there are having a huge impact on wide body, particularly wide body cargo.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we're at the 4 p.m. deadline, so that takes us just to our second last slide. We might not get to the last one. You're all desperate to know the results. Most of you in the poll, and we'll circulate these in a slide just so you can all see who voted for what. Most of you guessed correctly that Newcastle is the only route in Emirates network to stock Newcastle Brown Ale, which I'm reliably informed is quite palatable. I'm taking others' words for it because it's not for me.
Not mine. Not taking my word for that.
Which is the most isolated airport in the world? Well, different websites tell you different things. Is it St Helena? Or is it Mataveri, which is Easter Island, or indeed McMurdo, which is Antarctica? I think the most commonly found response on Google was Mataveri, but yeah, and the audience was mixed. So 38% of you thought it was St Helena, 40% of you thought it was Mataveri. So there we are. They're probably equally remote. Now, this was a bit of a divisive one. Who is the operator of the oldest aircraft still in regular service? 47% of you thought it was Kenbarek, 23% Maldivian, and 30% Loganair. Now, Sanja, I'm going to let you answer this one.
What was it? It was the Maldivian, right?
Maldivian, yeah, it was Maldivian.
It was the Maldivian.
So we
were discussing too many things that I forgot about. 54 years of age or something.
We tricked you all.
Yes.
54 years old, which is quite incredible, isn't it? What a
and it's only been dug out the water once. Anyway, let's move on.
And it's a twin otter, of course, you know, that will fly forever.
That is young for a twin otter.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Okay, how many stops does the route with the most stops have? Nobody. 35% of you got that right. 10 for the Safari Link routing in Kenya. Which country has the airport with the highest altitude in the world? Now, most people guessed Nepal. So 50% of you thought it was Nepal, 35% Bolivia. Only 15% of you who guessed China were right. It's China. China has got 6 airports that are over 4,000 meters high. So you've hopefully all learned something new on that front.
In Tibet, yeah.
And then our second last question was a little bit of a trick question. So which 2 countries with big populations are there no flights between? We started out saying it was India and China because they have the biggest populations. But those of you who answered Brazil, Indonesia, and China, Brazil are also correct. There are no services, direct services between any of those countries, according to our schedules data anyway. Last but not least, and we're like running dangerously over time here, we didn't ask this question on the poll because we just wanted to put this to the panel. Why do Canadian airport codes start with a Y? Do they all start with a Y is the first question. Courtney, that's for you.
What do you think? I know. Listen, they kicked me out of that country years ago.
Dawn, you know the answer.
Yeah, so it's because those with a Y, also used to, and maybe still do, have a weather station attached to the airport.
There you go. That, I mean, there's just nothing else we can say, is there? Really, that's an immense little bit of quiz-winning knowledge. Okay, so I'm going to close with that picture. The biggest ever aircraft to land in Antarctica was a Norse 787 Dreamliner. And yeah, that just that's our kind of closing shot. We've had a bit of fun today. We've hopefully shared some interesting insights with you. We've given ourselves some food for thought for future webinars, which is always good. And it just leaves me to say a big thank you to our speakers for joining us and engaging in indulging our inner AvGeek.
Been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. It was my pleasure as well. So sorry for stepping over time.
No, not at all. Courtney, thank you. Thank you for joining us, and let's hope when we see you both back really soon.
Yes, I'm always in.
Thanks. Bye.
Perfect. Thanks, everyone. Bye. Bye.